The silence hit the galaxy like a wave. Every communication channel across 1,000 star systems went dead at exactly 14:32 Galactic Standard Time. No warnings, no static, just nothing. On the mining world of Kepler 442c, Marcus Chen felt his blood turn cold as his comm unit flatlined. The device that had chirped with constant chatter from cargo ships, orbital stations, and deep space freighters suddenly displayed a flat line where the signal's strength should have been. "What the hell?" he whispered, tapping the side of the battered, human-made device. Around him, the alien workers in the fusion plant had stopped their tasks. Their six-limbed bodies trembled with the same confusion he felt. Zareth, his Kithurian supervisor, approached on her powerful hind legs. Her silver carapace caught the artificial light as her four arms gestured in distress. The translator chip in Marcus's ear converted her clicking speech into broken English. "Engineer Chen, the long-speak networks, they are broken, all of them." Marcus had worked on Kepler 442c for 3 years, ever since Earth's colonial expansion program placed him here as a fusion reactor specialist. The Kithurians were good people, patient, methodical, and surprisingly accepting of the few humans scattered across their industrial worlds. But right now, Zareth's usually calm demeanor was cracking. "It's not broken," Marcus said, studying his readings. "It's like someone just turned everything off." Above them, through the transparent aluminum dome of the facility, the orange dwarf star cast its eternal twilight across the rocky landscape. But something else caught Marcus's eye, streaks of light in the atmosphere that shouldn't be there. Ships. Lots of them. "Zareth, look up." The Kithurian's compound eyes shifted skyward, and she made a sound Marcus had never heard before, a low, terrified whistle that needed no translation. The ships descending through the atmosphere weren't Kithurian. They weren't human either. Marcus recognized the sleek, predatory design from intelligence briefings he'd received during his military service 15 years ago. Vorthak assault craft. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters," Marcus ordered, his old combat instincts kicking in. "Now." But Zareth didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at the approaching ships with something beyond fear in her multifaceted eyes. "They promised," she whispered. "The hegemony promised we would be protected if we joined. They said no one would attack us." The Galactic hegemony. Marcus had heard plenty about the alliance of advanced alien races that controlled most of known space. Humanity was too young, too primitive to join. They were barely tolerated on worlds like this one, working as manual laborers and technicians. But the hegemony's protection was supposed to be absolute. "Promises don't stop plasma cannons," Marcus said grimly, grabbing Zareth's upper arm. "We need to move." The first explosion hit the communications array on the far side of the mining complex. Even through the dome, the shockwave knocked several workers to the ground. Emergency alarms finally began wailing, a piercing sound that made Marcus's teeth ache. As they ran toward the shelter tunnels, Marcus's mind raced. The communications blackout, the simultaneous attack, this wasn't random. Someone had coordinated this across multiple star systems. But who had that kind of reach, and why attack now? The shelter entrance was chaos. Dozens of Kithurians pressed against the sealed blast doors, their clicking speech creating a wall of panic. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his human height giving him an advantage over most of the workers. "The doors won't open," someone shouted in Galactic Standard. "The security system is locked out." Marcus knelt by the control panel, his fingers dancing over the Kithurian symbols he'd learned to read. The display showed a cascade of error messages, but underneath the alien text, he spotted something that made his heart sink. Emergency protocols had been overridden, remotely. "Someone's jamming us from orbit," he said to Zareth. "They locked down the shelters before they attacked." Another explosion, closer this time. The dome above them cracked, and the artificial atmosphere began to hiss out through the fractures. Marcus felt his ears pop as the pressure dropped. "There has to be another way," Zareth said, her four arms clutched at Marcus's jacket. "The old mining tunnels. Before the hegemony built this facility, my people dug deep shafts to reach the rare metals." Marcus nodded. It was their only chance. As the Vorthak ships landed in the main courtyard and began disgorging troops, he led a group of 30 Kithurians toward the maintenance levels. The abandoned tunnels might not have life support, but they were better than facing whatever the Vorthak had planned. In the depths of the facility, as emergency lighting cast dancing shadows on the walls, Marcus found an old human-made comm unit he'd installed years ago. It was a simple radio transmitter, the kind Earth's military used for short-range battlefield communications. Primitive by galactic standards, but maybe primitive enough to slip through whatever was jamming the advanced systems. He powered it up and tuned to the emergency frequency Earth Command had given him when he took this assignment. This is Marcus Chen, Colonial Engineering Corps, Station Kepler 442C. We are under attack by unknown forces. Repeat, we are under attack. All galactic communications are down, if anyone can hear this. Static answered him, but then, faint and crackling with interference, a voice came through. Marcus, Jesus, Marcus, is that you? This is Commander Sarah Torres, Earth Defense Force. We've been trying to reach our people for hours. What's your situation? Relief flooded through Marcus's chest. Sarah, thank God. We've got Vorthak troops on the ground and the whole communication grid is dark. What the hell is happening out there? The pause that followed was too long. Marcus, Sarah's voice was tight with something between fear and anticipation. I need you to listen carefully. 6 hours ago, the experimental Railgun project at Luna Station achieved first successful firing. The test shot was detected by every sensor array within 50 light-years. Marcus frowned. So, Earth's been working on Railgun tech for years. This wasn't just any Railgun, Marcus. The projectile achieved 97% of light speed. It punched through 3 asteroids and a derelict space station like they were made of paper. The energy output was... She paused. It was unlike anything the galaxy has seen from a species our age. The pieces began clicking together in Marcus's mind. The communication blackout, the coordinated attacks, the fear in Zarath's eyes. They're not just attacking us, he whispered. They're attacking everyone who might support us. Marcus, within an hour of the test firing, every human colony, every human ship, every world with significant human populations went dark. We think someone, or multiple someones, decided that humanity just became too dangerous to ignore. Above them, Marcus could hear the sound of plasma cutters slicing through the blast doors they'd sealed behind them. The Vorthak were methodical. They'd find them eventually. But now Marcus understood why the galaxy had gone silent. Humanity hadn't just fired a railgun. They'd announced to every advanced civilization in known space that the primitive apes from Earth were no longer primitive. And someone had decided to do something about it before humanity could fire a second shot. The plasma cutters grew louder. In the distance, he could hear Zarath's people praying in their ancient language, preparing for whatever came next. Marcus keyed his radio one more time. Sarah, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens out here, don't let them stop the Railgun project, if they're this scared of one test shot. He looked at Zarath, who was staring at him with those compound eyes full of trust despite everything. Maybe it's time they had a reason to be scared. The blast doors exploded inward, filling the tunnel with smoke and the harsh blue light of Vorthak weapons. The Vorthak soldiers that poured through the shattered blast doors were nothing like the industrial workers Marcus was used to seeing. These were predators, 2 meters tall, with razor-sharp bone spines protruding from their shoulders and arms that ended in claws designed for ripping rather than building. Marcus had fought Vorthak raiders once before, during the Proxima incident 7 years ago. He remembered their tactics: overwhelming force, no prisoners, and a complete disregard for civilian casualties. Stay behind me, he whispered to Zarath as he drew the plasma cutter from his tool belt. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The first Vorthak soldier rounded the corner, its red eyes scanning the tunnel through a combat helmet that made it look even more nightmarish. When it spotted Marcus, it let out a harsh bark, probably alerting the others. Marcus didn't give it the chance to raise its weapon. The plasma cutter's beam sliced across the creature's chest, and it dropped with a shriek that echoed through the tunnels. Run, Marcus shouted to the Cathurians. Follow the old mining tracks deeper. But as they fled deeper into the facility's forgotten depths, Marcus realized they were being herded. The Vorthak weren't trying to kill them quickly, they were driving them somewhere specific. Every time the group tried to take a side passage, plasma blasts would force them back to the main tunnel. Engineer Chen, Zarath panted as they ran. Her 4 arms pumped rhythmically, but even her species' natural endurance was being tested. The deep tunnels. They lead to the old fusion batteries, if the Vorthak are forcing us there. Marcus's blood turned cold. The old fusion batteries were decommissioned, but they still contained enough unstable material to level half the mining complex, if the Vorthak detonated them while the workers were trapped nearby. It's not about killing us quickly, Marcus realized. They want to make a statement, show the other worlds what happens to anyone who works with humans. Behind them, the sound of clawed feet on metal grew closer. But ahead, Marcus could see something that gave him hope. The old fusion battery chamber was massive, with multiple exits and plenty of places to hide. If he could somehow turn off the containment fields without causing an explosion. They burst into the chamber, and Marcus immediately saw the problem. The fusion batteries were arranged in a perfect circle, their containment fields creating a maze of deadly energy barriers. The Cathurians crowded into the center of the room, trapped by the very safety systems designed to protect them. The Vorthak soldiers appeared at the entrance, but they didn't advance. Instead, their leader, a massive specimen with scars covering his bone spines, spoke in accented Galactic standard. "Humans and their pets," he said, the words dripping with contempt. "You thought your primitive species could hide among the civilized races forever." Marcus stepped forward, keeping himself between the soldiers and the workers. "What do you want?" The Vorthak leader's laugh was like grinding metal. "Your species fired a weapon that violated every treaty in known space. A railgun that can achieve near-light velocity threatens the balance that has kept the galaxy peaceful for 1,000 years. "One test shot," Marcus said. "We were testing our own technology in our own system. One test shot that could punch through the hull of any ship in space. One test shot that made every government in the hegemony realize that Earth's children are no longer the harmless workers they pretended to be." The fusion batteries hummed ominously around them. Marcus could see sweat beading on Zarath's silver carapace. The Cathurians knew as well as he did that they were standing in the middle of a bomb. "So you decided to wipe us out," Marcus said. "All of us, even the ones who had nothing to do with the Railgun project." "Prevention is simpler than containment," the Vorthak leader replied. "Your species will be remembered as a cautionary tale, the young race that reached too high too fast." But as the alien spoke, Marcus noticed something odd. The soldier's weapon, a standard Vorthak plasma rifle, had a small device attached to its power coupling. A device that looked suspiciously like hegemony technology. "You're not doing this alone," Marcus said quietly. "Someone in the hegemony is backing you." The Vorthak leader's expression didn't change, but Marcus caught a flicker of something in those red eyes. Uncertainty. "It doesn't matter who gave the orders," the soldier said. "What matters is that humanity's expansion ends here." Marcus heard the whine of charging plasma rifles and knew they were out of time. But then Zarath's voice cut through the tension. "Wait," she said, stepping forward with her forearms raised. "I wish to speak with your commander about the Compact of Mutual Defense." The Vorthak leader paused. The compact was ancient law. Any member of the hegemony could invoke it to demand protection from aggression. It was bureaucratic nonsense most of the time, but it carried serious legal weight. "The compact does not apply to associates of outlaw species," the soldier said, but Marcus heard doubt in his voice. "Kepler 442c is a sovereign Cathurian world," Zarath continued. "We have hosted human workers under proper diplomatic protocols. If you execute civilians here, you violate not just the compact, but the Treaty of Stellar Commerce." Marcus admired Zarath's courage, but he could see the Vorthak leader getting impatient. Legal technicalities wouldn't stop him for long. That's when Marcus noticed the old maintenance panel near the fusion batteries. If he could overload just one containment field and create a controlled discharge, the electromagnetic pulse might disable the Vorthak weapons long enough for them to escape. He started edging toward the panel, hoping the aliens wouldn't notice his movement. "The treaties are suspended in cases of species-level threats," the Vorthak leader said. "Your human pet has demonstrated technology that—" "That what?" Marcus interrupted, his hand now inches from the maintenance panel. "That scares you." The Vorthak's red eyes fixed on him with deadly focus. "Nothing about your species scares us, human." Marcus smiled grimly. "Then why are you here?" He slammed his hand down on the emergency discharge control. The fusion battery next to him erupted in a controlled release of electromagnetic energy. The pulse washed over the entire chamber, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room went dead. The Vorthak weapons powered down with disappointed whines, their targeting systems dark. In the sudden darkness, Marcus grabbed Zarath's upper arm. "Now we run." But as they fled through the maintenance tunnels, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only delayed the inevitable. The Vorthak were just the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness of space, bigger players were making moves against humanity. And Earth's colonies scattered across the galaxy were running out of time. The radio in his pocket crackled to life, Sarah's voice, faint but urgent. "Marcus, we're getting reports from 17 systems. It's not just raiders. There are full battle fleets moving toward human colonies. Whatever they're planning, it's bigger than we thought." Marcus looked back at the Cathurians following him through the tunnels, innocent people caught in the crossfire of galactic politics they didn't understand. Whatever Earth had started with that railgun test, it was already spiraling beyond anyone's control. The hunt for humanity had begun. The maintenance tunnels beneath the mining complex were a maze of corroded pipes and forgotten machinery. Marcus led the group of 30 Cathurians through passages so narrow they had to move single file, their breathing the only sound besides the distant rumble of explosions above. "Engineer Chen," Zarath whispered as they paused at a junction. "The surface tremors are getting stronger. They're destroying the entire facility." Marcus pressed his ear to the tunnel wall and heard what she meant. The rhythmic vibrations weren't random, they were systematic. The Vorthak were methodically demolishing every structure on the surface, making sure no one could hide or escape. "They're not just here to kill us," Marcus realized. "They're erasing any evidence that humans ever worked here." His radio crackled again. Sarah's voice was barely audible through the interference, but Marcus caught fragments. "Coordinated across 73 systems, orbital bombardments, Luna Station under." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. If Luna Station was under attack, that meant Earth's primary military installation was compromised. The Railgun project, Earth's greatest technological achievement, might already be gone. "We need to reach the emergency communication array," Marcus said. "There's a backup transmitter in the geological survey station, about 2 kilometers through these tunnels." But Zarath made a sound of distress, the same whistle she'd used when they first saw the Vorthak ships. "Engineer Chen, the survey station. It was built over the sacred pools. If we go there, we'll be violating the most ancient law of my people." Marcus stopped walking. The Cathurians were deeply spiritual, and their sacred sites were absolutely forbidden to outsiders. In 3 years of working on this world, he'd never even seen the pools Zarath was talking about. "How bad would it be," he asked, "if we went there?" Zarath's 4 arms trembled. "Worse than death. We would be cast out from the song of our ancestors, denied entry to the eternal current when our bodies fail." The other Cathurians made soft, clicking sounds of agreement. Even facing annihilation, they were terrified of violating their most sacred beliefs. Marcus looked at their faces, so alien, but expressing emotions he recognized. Fear, desperation, and absolute faith in something bigger than themselves. "Then we find another way," he said simply. The relief in Zarath's compound eyes was immediate. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know this complicates our escape, but—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "It doesn't complicate anything. If your people's beliefs matter to you, they matter to me too." It was a statement that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago, when Marcus first arrived on Kepler 442c. Back then, he'd been like most humans, viewing alien cultures as obstacles to overcome rather than perspectives to respect. But working alongside the Cathurians had taught him something the military never had. Survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about preserving what made life worth living. They found an alternative route through the old water processing plant, but as they emerged into a larger chamber, Marcus heard something that made his heart race. Cathurian voices, speaking in rapid, frightened clicks. The voices weren't coming from their group. "Others survived," Zarath breathed. "Other workers escaped the surface." But as they moved toward the sound, Marcus held up a hand for silence. Mixed with the Cathurian voices, he heard something else, the measured footsteps of armored boots. They crept to the edge of the chamber and saw a nightmare. Dozens of Cathurian workers knelt in neat rows while Vorthak's soldiers stood guard. But these weren't the same raiders they'd encountered earlier. These soldiers wore different armor, sleeker, more advanced. And they weren't alone. A figure in hegemony diplomatic robes stood at the center of the chamber. Marcus couldn't see the alien's face clearly, but the ceremonial clothing marked them as a high-ranking official from one of the core worlds. The human presence on this world has been terminated, the diplomat was saying in perfect galactic standard. You will be relocated to processing centers where your loyalty to the hegemony will be evaluated. One of the kneeling Cathurians, an older supervisor Marcus recognized from the fusion plant, spoke up. We have done nothing wrong. We followed all protocols for hosting alien workers. Why are we being punished? The diplomat's response was chillingly calm. Because you chose to work with a species that threatens galactic stability. Your association with humans makes you complicit in their crimes against the natural order. Marcus felt Zarath's hand grip his arm. Her 4 fingers were trembling with rage. Crimes, the old supervisor continued. What crimes? The humans here were engineers and technicians. They helped us build better reactors, improved our mining efficiency. They shared their knowledge, the diplomat said. Knowledge that made them dangerous. The supervisor's voice rose in confusion. How does knowledge make someone dangerous? Understanding fusion physics, quantum mechanics, engineering principles, these things help everyone. Marcus understood now. It wasn't just the railgun that had terrified the galaxy's power structure. It was what the railgun represented, proof that humans could innovate, could create technologies that rivaled or exceeded what the established races had achieved. Humanity hadn't just built a weapon. They demonstrated that they were capable of technological leaps that could disrupt the carefully maintained balance of galactic power. The hegemony has thrived for millennia because each species knows its place, the diplomat explained with patient condescension. The Vorthak are warriors, the Cathurians are workers, the Zelani are scholars. This order creates stability. And humans, the old supervisor asked, were supposed to remain primitive long enough for us to guide their development properly. Instead, they learned too quickly, built too efficiently, and reached too high. The diplomat's tone turned cold. Now they must be contained before they destabilize everything we've built. Marcus had heard enough. These weren't random raiders or military extremists. This was a coordinated effort by the hegemony itself to eliminate humanity as a potential rival. But as he watched the captured Cathurians being prepared for transport, Marcus realized something else. The aliens in charge had made a critical error. They assumed that suppressing human innovation would solve their problem. They had no idea that the real strength of humanity wasn't their technology. It was their ability to form bonds across species lines. Zarath, Marcus whispered, how many Cathurian worlds have human workers? She thought for a moment. Perhaps 50 systems, maybe 100. Humans are valuable for dangerous work, mining, reactor maintenance, deep space construction. And how many of those Cathurian workers would be angry if their human colleagues were murdered? Understanding dawned in Zarath's compound eyes. All of them, she whispered. Cathurians value loyalty above all things. If the hegemony is betraying humans who worked faithfully beside us, then they're not just fighting humanity, Marcus said. They're fighting everyone who learned to trust us. The implications were staggering. The hegemony thought they were eliminating a single species, but they were actually attacking the bonds that held their own alliance together. Marcus keyed his radio one more time, hopping against hope that Sarah could still hear him. Sarah, if you're receiving this, I need you to understand something. The attacks aren't random. The hegemony itself is behind this. They're trying to eliminate human influence before it spreads further. He looked at Zarath, who nodded encouragingly. But they've made a mistake. They're not just fighting us. They're fighting everyone who chose to work with us. In the chamber below, the Vorthak soldiers began herding their prisoners toward transport vehicles. But Marcus noticed something the guards hadn't. Several of the captured Cathurians were looking toward the ventilation grates, their compound eyes tracking movement in the shadows. Other groups had survived. Other workers were hiding in the tunnels. And if Kepler 442c was any indication, humans and their alien colleagues across the galaxy weren't going to go quietly into extinction. The real war was just beginning. The abandoned water treatment plant became their base of operations. Over the next 6 hours, as the Vorthak continued their systematic destruction of the surface facilities, Marcus and Zarath managed to contact 17 other groups of survivors hiding throughout the mining complex. The numbers were both heartening and terrifying. Nearly 300 Cathurian workers had escaped the initial assault, along with 8 other humans scattered across different work sites. But the Vorthak forces numbered in the thousands, and they showed no signs of leaving anytime soon. Marcus had managed to establish radio contact with 3 other human colonies under attack. The pattern was always the same: communications blackout, orbital assault, ground forces that seemed more interested in destruction than occupation. But the most disturbing part was what they weren't hearing: no calls for help from Earth itself. "It's been 12 hours since the Railgun test," Marcus told the assembled group of survivors. They'd gathered in the largest section of the treatment plant, where ancient Cathurian engineering had created a chamber that could hold several hundred people. "Either Earth is completely cut off, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood the alternative. Zarath stood beside him, translating his words into the rapid-click language of her people. Marcus had learned enough Cathurian over the years to follow the basic meaning, and he could see the fear in their body language. These weren't soldiers. They were engineers, technicians, maintenance workers. Most had never seen violence worse than an industrial accident. But they were still alive, and they were angry. "Engineer Chen," said Thekvar, one of the senior supervisors, "the hegemony forces have made a serious error. They destroyed our communication relays, but they did not destroy our emergency beacons." Marcus felt a spark of hope. The beacons that alert other Cathurian worlds when there's an industrial disaster. Exactly. Before the attack began, 17 workers activated their personal distress signals. By now, the news of what happened here has reached the Homeworld Council. That was significant. The Cathurian Homeworld Council was one of the most influential bodies in the hegemony. If they learned that Cathurian workers had been attacked without justification. "But there's something else," Thekvar continued. "The sacred pools that Zarath mentioned earlier, they're not just religious sites. They're also our planetary communication hub. The ancient songs our ancestors sang were actually quantum-encoded messages transmitted through the planet's crystalline core." Marcus stared at him. "You're saying your religious ceremonies are actually a planet-wide communication network?" "Were," Zarath corrected. "The technology was lost centuries ago, but the physical infrastructure remains, if someone with the right knowledge could reactivate it. We could send a message that would reach every Cathurian world simultaneously," Thekvar finished. "Tell them exactly what the hegemony did here." It was a beautiful idea, but Marcus could see the problem immediately. "The pools are sacred. You said yourselves that going there would violate your most ancient laws." The Cathurians exchanged glances, their compound eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. Finally, an elderly worker named Shantu spoke up. "Our laws forbid outsiders from entering the sacred pools," she said slowly. "But they say nothing about bringing the pools to outsiders." Marcus frowned. "I don't understand." "The quantum communication system isn't just in the pools themselves," Shantu explained. "It's built into the planet's entire crystalline matrix. The pools are the primary access point, but there are secondary nodes throughout the old mining network." Zarath's 4 arms began gesturing excitedly. "The abandoned shafts where we first hid, they were dug near one of the secondary nodes, if we could access it. We could transmit our story across the galaxy without violating the sacred laws," Marcus said, understanding dawning. "But do any of you know how to operate 1,000-year-old quantum communication equipment?" The Cathurians looked at each other uncertainly. Their technical knowledge was impressive, but it focused on modern fusion technology and industrial processes. Ancient quantum systems were completely different. That's when Lisa Park, one of the other human survivors, spoke up. "Actually, I might be able to help with that." Marcus turned to look at her. Lisa was a communications specialist who'd been working on the orbital relay station when the attack began. She'd managed to escape in a maintenance pod before the station was destroyed. "Quantum communication theory is quantum communication theory," Lisa continued. "The principles don't change, just the implementation. If I can get a look at the hardware, I can probably figure out how to make it work." It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. 2 hours later, Marcus found himself crawling through a maintenance shaft that hadn't been used in decades, following Zarath toward the secondary communication node. Lisa crawled behind him, carrying a toolkit improvised from mining equipment and spare electronic components. The shaft opened into a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The walls were lined with crystals that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Delicate patterns were etched into the stone, forming geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. "This is beautiful," Lisa whispered. "It's like someone turned mathematics into art." Zarath moved to the center of the chamber, where a complex array of crystalline structures rose from the floor like a frozen garden. "These are the secondary resonance nodes. They haven't been activated in over 800 years. Lisa approached the array carefully, her scanning equipment beeping softly as it analyzed the crystalline matrix. "The power distribution is incredible," she said. "Each crystal is both a transmitter and a receiver, linked to every other node on the planet through quantum entanglement." "Can you make it work?" Marcus asked. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, studying the readouts on her improvised scanner. "Maybe. But if I'm right about how this system operates, activating it will create a quantum resonance cascade that will be detectable across half the galaxy." Meaning? "Meaning every ship within 50 light-years will know exactly where we are and what we're doing." Marcus considered this. They were already hiding from occupation forces that wanted them dead. Revealing their location would certainly bring more enemies. But it would also bring the truth to light. "How long would we have?" he asked. "Between activation and when the cavalry arrives to shut us down?" "Maybe 6 hours," Lisa said. "Long enough to broadcast our message to every Cathurian world, and probably to human colonies too if I can boost the signal strength." "And then?" Lisa met his eyes. "Then we find out whether the galaxy believes in justice more than it fears change." Marcus looked at Zarath, who was staring at the ancient communication array with something approaching reverence. "What do you think?" he asked her. "Is it worth the risk?" Zarath's compound eyes reflected the crystal's ethereal glow. "Engineer Chen, my people have a saying. The song that is never sung cannot inspire others to sing. If we remain silent, the lies about humanity will become the only truth the galaxy knows." Marcus nodded. "Then let's make some noise." But as Lisa began connecting her equipment to the crystalline array, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to cross a line they couldn't come back from. The galaxy's power structure had remained stable for millennia because most species accepted their assigned roles. Humanity had already shattered that stability with one railgun test. Now they were about to show the galaxy what happened when humans and aliens decided to stand together. The crystals began to hum with power, and Marcus realized that win or lose, nothing would ever be the same. The quantum cascade began at 03:47 local time. Lisa's improvised equipment interface sparked and hummed as it connected with the ancient Cathurian communication array. The crystals throughout the chamber began to glow brighter, their light shifting from pale blue to brilliant white as quantum energy flowed through the planetary matrix. "It's working," Lisa breathed, watching her readouts with amazement. "The signal is propagating through the crystalline network faster than I thought possible. We're already reaching nodes on the other side of the planet." Marcus felt the vibrations through his feet as the entire chamber resonated with harmonic frequencies. "How long until we can transmit off-world?" "Soon. The system is building up to full power automatically, probably a safety feature to prevent damage to the quantum matrix." Lisa's fingers flew over her controls as she fine-tuned the connection. "But Marcus, when this thing reaches full power, every sensor array within 100 light-years is going to light up like a Christmas tree." Zarath moved to another part of the crystal array, where patterns of light were beginning to flow through the stone like liquid electricity. "The ancestral nodes are awakening," she said with wonder. "I can feel their songs in my carapace." "Songs?" Marcus asked. "Quantum vibrations create harmonics that our bodies can sense," Zarath explained. "My ancestors used these resonances to communicate across vast distances, what your friend calls quantum entanglement, we called the eternal song." Lisa looked up from her equipment. "Actually, that's not a bad description. Quantum-entangled particles do create standing wave patterns that could theoretically be converted to audio frequencies. She paused, listening to the growing hum around them. Your ancestors were more sophisticated than anyone realized. The implications were staggering. If the Cathurians had been using quantum communication technology for over 1,000 years, that meant they had been far more advanced than they appeared. But then why had they seemed so dependent on modern hegemony technology? We forgot, Zarath said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. When the hegemony offered us membership, they convinced us that our old ways were primitive, that we should abandon our ancestral knowledge for their more efficient systems. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. The hegemony hadn't just been controlling technological development, they had been actively suppressing it. How many species had been convinced to abandon their own innovations in favor of hegemony standardization? Power at 70% and climbing, Lisa reported. Signal strength is approaching interstellar transmission levels. But even as the ancient system awakened, Marcus could hear trouble approaching. Through the walls of the chamber, the sound of digging equipment grew louder. The Vorthak had detected the power buildup and were trying to reach them. How much longer? Marcus asked. 2 minutes until full power, Lisa said. But I can start broadcasting at 80% if necessary. The digging sounds suddenly stopped, replaced by a more ominous noise, the whine of plasma cutters. They'd found the chamber's location and were cutting through the final barriers. 80% power achieved, Lisa announced. Beginning transmission now. Marcus activated his radio and began speaking into the transmitter Lisa had jury-rigged to the quantum array. His voice would be carried by quantum-entangled particles to communication nodes across the galaxy, bypassing every jamming system the hegemony possessed. This is Marcus Chen, Human Colonial Engineering Corps, broadcasting from Kepler 442c. 12 hours ago, Earth conducted a successful test of experimental railgun technology. Within minutes of that test, coordinated attacks began on human colonies across the galaxy. The plasma cutters grew louder, their harsh light beginning to seep through cracks in the chamber wall. But this isn't just about humans, Marcus continued, looking at Zarath as she monitored the quantum resonance patterns. The hegemony is systematically destroying anyone who chose to work with us, anyone who learned from us, anyone who dared to believe that cooperation between species could create something better than what existed before. Zarath stepped forward and began speaking in her own language, her words flowing through the quantum array to every Cathurian world. Marcus couldn't understand all of her speech, but he caught fragments, words about betrayal, about sacred trust broken, about the courage to stand for truth against power. The first section of wall collapsed in a shower of molten metal and stone. Vorthak's soldiers began pouring through the breach, their weapons raised and ready. But something strange happened. Instead of immediately firing, they hesitated. One of them was shouting into a communicator, his voice filled with something Marcus had never heard from a Vorthak before: uncertainty. The quantum cascade is at 95%, Lisa reported, her hands still flying over her controls even as plasma bolts began searing the air around them. I'm detecting response signals from... Jesus, Marcus, I'm getting responses from dozens of star systems. Marcus ducked behind a crystal formation as plasma fire erupted around them. What kind of responses? Ships, Lisa said, her voice tight with amazement and terror. Cathurian ships, human ships, even some I don't recognize. They're moving toward hegemony core systems. The lead Vorthak soldier finally got his orders and raised his weapon toward Marcus. But before he could fire, Zarath did something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. She stepped directly into the line of fire and began to sing. It wasn't the clicking speech Marcus was used to hearing from Cathurians. This was something older, deeper, a harmonic vocalization that seemed to resonate with the quantum crystals themselves. The sound filled the chamber, growing louder and more complex as it harmonized with the ancient communication array. The Vorthak soldier's weapon wavered. Around the chamber, other soldiers lowered their guns, their faces showing confusion and something approaching awe. What is she doing? Marcus asked. Lisa's scanner was going crazy, displaying patterns Marcus had never seen before. She's interfacing directly with the quantum matrix, Lisa whispered. Her vocal cords are producing frequencies that match the crystalline resonance. She's turning herself into part of the communication system. Through the quantum array, amplified by Zarath's voice and transmitted across the galaxy, came a sound that no species had heard for centuries, the true song of the Kithurian people. Not the simplified clicking of modern galactic standard, but the complex harmonic language their ancestors had used to speak across the stars. And every Kithurian in the galaxy heard it. Marcus's radio crackled to life with reports from across known space. Human colonies under siege reported that their Kithurian colleagues were abandoning their posts, not to flee, but to commandeer ships and weapons. Hegemony installations were going offline as Kithurian technical staff walked away from their duties en masse. The song continued, growing stronger as more Kithurians across the galaxy added their voices to the quantum chorus. Through the array, Marcus could hear hundreds, then thousands, then millions of voices joining the ancient harmony. "Power at 100%, Lisa announced. "The signal is propagating throughout the entire galactic communication network." But the most astonishing thing was what the song was doing to the Vorthak soldiers. They stood frozen, their weapons forgotten, staring at Zarath as she sang the truth of what had happened on Kepler 442c. Through the quantum array, her voice carried not just words but emotions, memories, and the deep sense of betrayal felt by every Kithurian who had trusted in hegemony protection. The song told the story of humans who had worked alongside aliens as equals, sharing knowledge and building trust across species lines. It spoke of innovation inspired by cooperation, of technologies developed not for war, but for the betterment of all. And it mourned the violent end of that cooperation, imposed by those who feared what unity between species might accomplish. One by one, the Vorthak soldiers began lowering their weapons entirely. Marcus's radio erupted with new transmissions. Sarah's voice cut through the static, stronger and clearer than before. "Marcus, Marcus, can you hear me? The jamming just lifted across 17 sectors. We're getting reports of hegemony forces standing down on multiple fronts." "Sarah, what's happening out there?" "It's incredible, Marcus. The Kithurian fleet just declared independence from the hegemony. They're demanding an immediate cessation of hostilities and a full investigation into the attacks on human colonies. And they're not alone. We're getting similar declarations from the Zelani science worlds and even some of the core trade systems." Through Zarath's song, Marcus could feel the change rippling across the galaxy. Species that had accepted hegemony authority for millennia were suddenly questioning why humans had to be eliminated. What threat did cooperation and innovation actually pose to anyone except those who profited from keeping the galaxy divided? The quantum array reached full resonance, and Zarath's song became something more than communication. It became a call to action that transcended species barriers. Every being in the galaxy who had ever wondered if there was a better way to live, work, and explore the stars heard that call and began to answer. But as the ancient crystals blazed with unprecedented power, Marcus realized they had accomplished something far more dangerous than sending a message across the galaxy. They had started a revolution. And revolutions, once begun, rarely stopped where their creators intended. The hegemony's response came within 6 hours of the quantum broadcast. Marcus watched from the damaged observation dome as warships dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442c, not the crude assault vessels of the Vorthak, but the sleek, advanced dreadnoughts of the hegemony's central fleet. These were ships designed to crack planets, not just occupy them. 37 capital ships, Lisa reported, her improvised scanning equipment tracking the new arrivals. They're not here to negotiate. But something was different about this fleet. Marcus could see it in their formation, scattered, uncertain, like they weren't sure what they were facing. And the Vorthak ground forces that had been systematically destroying the mining complex had stopped their demolition work entirely. "The quantum song is still propagating," Zarath said. She looked exhausted from her hours-long broadcast, but her compound eyes still gleamed with determination. "My people across the galaxy are awakening to truths they had forgotten." Marcus's radio crackled with updates from across known space. The situation was changing by the hour. Sarah's voice cut through the static. "Marcus, the Hegemony Council has issued an ultimatum. They're demanding that all rebel systems surrender within 72 hours or face corrective military action." "How many systems are we talking about?" Marcus asked. Over 200 worlds have declared independence in the last 6 hours. The Cathurian Homeworld Council is leading a coalition demanding immediate democratic reforms to the hegemony structure. And Marcus, Sarah's voice carried a note of amazement. Earth just received its first formal diplomatic contact from non-human species. 3 different alien governments want to establish direct relations with humanity, bypassing the hegemony entirely. The implications were staggering. In less than a day, humanity had gone from being hunted outcasts to the catalyst for the largest political upheaval in galactic history. But revolutions attracted counter-revolutions, and the hegemony had controlled the galaxy for too long to give up power without a fight. Incoming transmission, Lisa announced. It's from the lead hegemony ship. Marcus activated his radio, knowing that whatever came next would determine whether their revolution survived its first day. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, cold and imperious. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Central Command. You will surrender the quantum communication array and submit to lawful authority. You have 10 minutes to comply. Marcus looked around the chamber at the group of humans and Cathurians who had started this galactic uprising. Exhausted workers, scared technicians, and one communications specialist who had figured out how to wake up a 1,000-year-old quantum network. They didn't look like revolutionaries, but then again, revolutionaries rarely did. "Admiral," Marcus replied, "this is Marcus Chen. I'm afraid we can't comply with your order." "Mr. Chen, you are interfering with lawful hegemony operations. Your species has violated multiple treaties regarding weapons development and technological dissemination." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "Our species fired one test shot in our own star system. You responded by trying to wipe us out completely. Your species demonstrated capabilities that threaten galactic stability. The hegemony exists to prevent such threats from destabilizing the natural order." "Whose natural order?" Marcus shot back. "The one where you decide which species gets to advance and which ones stay primitive forever." There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. When he did, his voice carried a note of something Marcus hadn't expected, genuine conviction. "Mr. Chen, you cannot understand the delicate balance required to maintain peace across thousands of worlds and hundreds of species. For millennia, we have prevented the wars that would consume the galaxy if every race pursued unlimited technological development. By suppressing innovation and forcing species into predetermined roles," Marcus said. "The Cathurians invented quantum communication centuries before humans existed, but you convinced them it was primitive. How many other technologies have you buried to maintain your balance?" Another pause. When Admiral Kethvar spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "You assume that innovation always leads to positive outcomes, but we have seen species destroy themselves with their own cleverness. We have watched civilizations collapse under the weight of changes they could not control." Marcus realized they were having a philosophical debate in the middle of a standoff that could determine the fate of the galaxy. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. "Admiral, with respect, you've been making those decisions for other species without asking what they wanted. The Cathurians didn't choose to abandon their quantum technology. You convinced them it was inferior. Humanity didn't choose to be excluded from galactic civilization. You decided we were too dangerous to include. And now your choices have led to system-wide rebellions and the breakdown of interstellar law," the Admiral replied. "How is this an improvement?" Marcus looked at Zareth, who was listening to the conversation with her 4 arms folded in concentration. "Zareth, do you want to answer that?" The Cathurian stepped forward and spoke into the radio transmitter. "Admiral, my name is Zareth Tekanen, Senior Fusion Engineer of the Kepler 442C mining facility. I have worked alongside humans for 3 years. In that time, I learned more about reactor design, quantum mechanics, and industrial safety than in the previous 20 years of my career. Technological exchange is permitted under proper supervision," the Admiral said. "But that's not what happened," Zareth continued. "The humans didn't just teach us their techniques, they asked us to teach them ours. They wanted to understand Cathurian engineering principles, our safety protocols, even our cultural approaches to problem solving. They treated our knowledge as valuable, not primitive." Marcus could hear something changing in the Admiral's tone. "Continue." "When the Vorthak came, Engineer Chen could have abandoned us and tried to save only himself and the other humans. Instead, he made sure every Cathurian worker had a chance to escape. He risked his life to preserve our sacred laws, even when violating them might have saved us all. Zarath's voice grew stronger. That's what cooperation looks like, Admiral, not supervision or management or control, partnership. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Kethvar spoke again, and his voice had changed completely. Ms. Tekanen, I am a Cathurian myself. I graduated from the Hegemony Naval Academy 40 years ago, and I have served with distinction in maintaining galactic order. Another pause. But I cannot remember the last time I sang the ancestral songs. Marcus felt the tension in the chamber shift. This wasn't going the way anyone had expected. Admiral, Marcus said carefully, what if there was a better way? What if species could cooperate and innovate without destabilizing the galaxy? What if the choice didn't have to be between stagnation and chaos? Mr. Chen, you're describing an idealistic fantasy. The hegemony exists because previous attempts at voluntary cooperation failed catastrophically. Then maybe it's time to try again, Marcus said, but this time with everything we've learned. Through the quantum array, Zarath's ancestral song continued to propagate across the galaxy, carrying with it not just the story of what had happened on Kepler 442c, but a vision of what could be possible when species worked together as equals. Marcus looked up at the hegemony fleet hanging in orbit above them, and wondered if an admiral who remembered the ancestral songs might be willing to listen to a new one. The fate of the galaxy was about to be decided by a conversation between enemies who were discovering they might not be enemies after all. Admiral Kethvar's ship landed near the ruins of the mining complex 3 hours later. Marcus watched through the damaged observation dome as the sleek hegemony vessel touched down with the precision of centuries of military engineering. But what emerged from its airlock wasn't what he expected. Admiral Kethvar was indeed Cathurian, but he wore his carapace like armor, every movement precise and controlled. Behind him came a small delegation, not soldiers, but beings Marcus recognized as representatives from multiple species. A Zelani scholar, a Torgan engineer, even what looked like a human in a hegemony uniform. They're coming to the communication chamber, Lisa reported, tracking the group's movement through the facility. No weapons, minimal escort. Zarath had insisted on meeting them at the entrance to the crystal chamber, despite her exhaustion from hours of quantum singing. As the delegation approached, she began the formal Cathurian greeting, forearms extended, head lowered in respect. Admiral Kethvar stopped in front of her and did something that shocked everyone present. He returned the gesture perfectly and then began to sing. It was the same ancestral melody that Zarath had broadcast across the galaxy, but coming from the Admiral's trained vocal cords, it carried harmonics that made the crystals throughout the chamber respond with gentle pulses of light. I had forgotten, the Admiral said when the brief song ended, how beautiful our true language sounds. Marcus stepped forward. Admiral, I want to apologize for the way this started. We never intended to start a revolution. Admiral Kethvar's compound eyes fixed on Marcus with sharp intelligence. Mr. Chen, in the 6 hours since your broadcast began, we have received formal declarations of independence from 237 worlds. The Hegemony Council is in emergency session. 3 member species have withdrawn from the Alliance entirely. He paused, looking around the crystal chamber with something approaching wonder. But we have also received something unprecedented. Applications for membership from 47 previously unaffiliated worlds, all requesting the right to pursue cooperative technological development under human-inspired protocols. The Zelani scholar stepped forward, her crystalline skin shimmering in the quantum array's light. Mr. Chen, my name is Velter. I represent the Zelani Science Collective. We wish to formally request access to human mathematical models, particularly your approaches to projectile physics and energy transfer calculations. Marcus blinked. You want our Railgun technology? Not just the technology, Velter clarified. The thinking behind it. Zelani scientists have been working on similar problems for decades, but we approached them from a completely different angle. Your species' solutions suggest mathematical frameworks we never considered. The Torgan engineer nodded agreement. Same with us. Torgan industrial processes are highly efficient, but they follow traditional patterns. The innovation we've seen from human-alien work teams suggests possibilities we want to explore. Admiral Kethvar raised a hand for silence. This is precisely what the Hegemony Council fears: unrestricted technological exchange leading to rapid, unpredictable advancement. But Admiral, Zarath said, is that fear worth the cost we've paid? How many innovations have been lost because species were forbidden to share knowledge? How many problems could have been solved if we had been allowed to work together freely? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, his forearms folded in the Cathurian gesture for deep contemplation. Mr. Chen, he said finally, your railgun test achieved 97% of light speed. Our projections indicate that with cooperative development, human Cathurian engineering teams could achieve full light-speed projectiles within a decade. Probably, Marcus agreed. Maybe faster if we had access to Zelani mathematical frameworks and Torgan manufacturing techniques. And what would you do with such technology? Marcus thought about the question carefully. A year ago, he might have answered with typical human ambition: exploration, expansion, the conquest of new frontiers. But 3 years of working alongside the Cathurians had taught him something different. Build things, he said simply. Better fusion reactors, faster ships for exploration. Maybe some of those mathematical frameworks could help with agricultural efficiency or medical technology. He looked at Zarath. We'd ask our partners what they thought we should build. Admiral Kethvar's expression was unreadable, but Marcus caught something in his body language, the slight relaxation of his stance that Cathurians displayed when considering new information. The hegemony was founded on the principle that rapid technological change leads to instability and war, the Admiral said. But perhaps we focused so much on preventing the dangers that we forgot to consider the possibilities. The human in the hegemony uniform stepped forward for the first time. She was older than Marcus, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in military service. Admiral, I'm Colonel Sarah Torres, Earth Defense Force. I've been in communication with our people across the galaxy. She looked at Marcus with a slight smile. Hello, Marcus. Sorry it took so long to find you. Sarah, Marcus felt relief flood through him. How's Earth? What happened to Luna Station? Luna Station is fine. The attack never came. Turns out the hegemony forces assigned to assault Earth had a lot of second thoughts when they realized they'd be killing the people who invented the technology they wanted to suppress. Sarah's expression grew serious. But Marcus, we need to talk about what happens next. Admiral Kethvar nodded. Colonel Torres has presented the Hegemony Council with a formal proposal, a new framework for technological development and interspecies cooperation. What kind of framework? Marcus asked. Sarah activated a portable holographic projector, displaying a complex organizational chart that Marcus recognized as the kind of thing military bureaucrats love to create. The Cooperative Development Initiative, she said. Voluntary participation, shared research, joint oversight committees, and most importantly, no species gets to decide what other species can or cannot develop. It was everything Marcus had imagined when he first dreamed of humans taking their place in galactic civilization. But it was also everything the current power structure was designed to prevent. Admiral, Marcus said, what does the Hegemony Council think of this proposal? They're terrified, Admiral Kethvar replied with what might have been amusement. But they're also intrigued. The preliminary models suggest that cooperative development could advance galactic technology by centuries within decades. And the dangers? Unknown, which is precisely what terrifies them. The Admiral's forearms gestured toward the quantum communication array, still humming with power. But then, Ms. Tekanen's broadcast has reminded us that our ancestors took similar risks when they first reached for the stars. Through the quantum array, Marcus could feel the vibrations of ongoing transmissions. Across the galaxy, species were talking to each other directly for the first time in millennia. Ideas were being shared, problems were being solved, and innovations were emerging at a pace that would have been impossible under the old system. There's something else, Zarath said, her compound eyes reflecting the crystal array's light. The quantum song has awakened more than just Cathurian memories. We're receiving transmissions from species we thought were extinct, civilizations that withdrew from galactic society when the hegemony was formed. Admiral Kethvar's stance shifted to alert attention. Which species? The first builders, the ones who constructed the original hyperspace networks. Zarath's voice carried a note of awe. They've been watching from the galactic rim for 2,000 years, waiting for the galaxy to remember what cooperation could accomplish. Marcus felt a chill of possibility. The first builders were legends, the species that had created the infrastructure that made galactic civilization possible, then vanished without explanation. They want to come home, Zarath continued, but only if the galaxy is ready to work together as it was meant to. Admiral Kethvar was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Mr. Chen, Ms. Tekkanen, Colonel Tors, the Hegemony Council has authorized me to negotiate the terms of a new galactic compact, one that preserves stability while allowing for cooperative innovation. Marcus looked around the crystal chamber, at the humans who had survived impossible odds, at the Cathurians who had risked everything to sing their truth across the stars, at the representatives of species who were choosing cooperation over control. "Admiral," he said, "I think we can work with that." Outside, through the damaged dome, Marcus could see the first ships of the new era arriving in orbit around Kepler 442c. Human vessels, Cathurian transports, Zelani research ships, and others he didn't recognize, all coming together to witness the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. The age of enforced stagnation was ending. The age of cooperative exploration was about to begin. And somewhere in the quantum song still flowing through the ancient crystal arrays, Marcus could hear the harmony of a billion voices across the galaxy, all singing the same melody, the song of species working together to build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The galaxy had fired its first railgun, and when the echoes faded, the universe had answered with possibilities none of them had dared to imagine. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new Kepler station, watching as the latest batch of cooperative research ships arrived from across the galaxy. What had once been a simple mining operation had become the hub of the Cooperative Development Initiative, a place where beings from dozens of species worked side by side to push the boundaries of what was possible. "The quantum communication network is fully operational," Zarath reported, her 4 arms dancing over the holographic displays with practiced precision. "We're now in real-time contact with research teams on over 400 worlds." Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see the fruits of 6 months of unprecedented cooperation. The new Railgun test platform hung in orbit like a mechanical constellation, its design incorporating human projectile physics, Cathurian fusion technology, Zelani mathematical frameworks, and innovations from a dozen other species. But the Railgun was just the beginning. In the distance, the framework of humanity's first faster-than-light ship was taking shape, not built by humans alone, but by the combined knowledge of every species willing to share their secrets. "Any word from the first builders?" Marcus asked. Zarath's compound eyes gleamed with excitement. "They've agreed to formal contact next month. Their delegation will arrive on ships that haven't been seen in the galaxy for 2 millennia. Marcus shook his head in wonder. When they'd fired that first railgun test 6 months ago, they thought they were testing a weapon. Instead, they'd tested the galaxy's readiness for change. The test had passed with flying colors. "Marcus," Sarah's voice came through the communication system, "we're getting reports from the Outer Rim surveys. The teams have found evidence of 12 previously unknown civilizations, all interested in joining the initiative." Marcus smiled. The galaxy was bigger than anyone had realized, and it was getting bigger every day as isolated species emerged from self-imposed exile to join the new cooperative framework. "And the hegemony?" Marcus asked. "Adapting," Sarah replied. "Admiral Kethvar has been elected as the first chairman of the Cooperative Council. Turns out he's quite good at organizing voluntary cooperation instead of enforced compliance." Through the quantum array, Marcus could feel the pulse of civilization itself, millions of minds working together, sharing knowledge, building toward a future none of them could have imagined alone. When humanity fired its first railgun, the galaxy went silent with shock. But when the shock faded, the galaxy sang back with a harmony that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The age of cooperation had begun, and the universe would never be the same.